of Israel, as I mentioned, is an Orthodox Jew who lives in Jerusalem. And from the time that the Sabbath begins at sundown on Friday until it ends at sundown on Saturday, he does no work. This has occasionally cut our conversations off rather abruptly because included in work are things like using electronic devices and turning off and on lights and driving a car and traveling any significant distance and many, many other things. And it gets really frustrating sometimes. This weekend, for example, he was just here last week, in Philadelphia. And I know he went back to Israel on Monday, he and his oldest son. And then Friday afternoon, I get a text saying, "Hi, I'm back in the States." And I said, "What's wrong? Is your mother okay?" And then it was sundown on the East Coast. So I had to wait till Saturday evening to find out what was going on. This does get a bit frustrating for me. You see, for an Orthodox Jew, the law of Moses is not a stagnant thing. It grows and it changes along with the world, and it has always been that way. As the years and technology move forward, the rabbis have been kept busy debating all of the various laws as they apply in the world today. In the case of Sabbath laws, they focus on what is and isn't work, so they know what's allowed on the Sabbath and what's not. Even things like putting on a wig and putting your dentures in have been debated and decisions made based on their work-relatedness. It is a very serious thing, the keeping of Sabbath. And sometimes I envy Israel because he knows exactly what to do to keep the Sabbath holy. Also because for at least 24 hours every single week, he is disconnected from the frenetic, anxiety-producing electronic world in which we live. Even so, when we spoke this morning, texted, he asked me to tell you that Sabbath is a gift, and when it's done right, is not very restful. I understand what he means a little bit, because every now and then I take an electronic Sabbath. But so far I've only managed to abstain during daylight hours. And that's really hard. No. But I try. The closest I come to actual Sabbath keeping is trying not to answer phone calls or emails that relate to work on Fridays, which is my day off. I can't even imagine a day, I don't even know if I want to imagine a day when I don't cook or clean or do laundry or turn lights off and on or run errands or do any of the things that I usually do on my one day off every week, or any other day for that matter. Light switch, yes, it's work, can't do that. And then there is this passage in which Jesus heals on the Sabbath. And he points out the hypocrisy involved in making sure that your domestic livestock are cared for, but being unwilling to see someone who has suffered for 18 years healed of her affliction on the Sabbath day. Well, alrighty then. We don't have to worry about Sabbath rules. This is good, yes? But just to confuse things, there is that pesky Matthew 5:17, where Jesus says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." And what's that supposed to mean? There's this thing we need to know about the law. Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." This is the greatest and the first commandment. This is what's known as the Shema. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Okay, here's the complicated part. All these 630 whatever laws that make up the law of Moses go back to the 10 Commandments. They are expansions on those commandments, as well as regulations that help keep a large and growing community in line. And the 10 Commandments are divided into 2 parts. The first 4 are how to love God. You shall have no other God before me. You shall make no idols. You shall not use God's name falsely. You shall remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. The other 6 are about how to love your neighbor. Honor your father and your mother. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Do not covet anything or person belonging to your neighbor. Now, we sometimes interpret these commandments a little differently than they were intended 3,500 years ago. But that's because our world and our culture changed so much that it never occurs to us that a word we used to mean one thing might have meant something different 3,500 years ago. It had quite a different meaning for the Hebrew people. So all of those 630 whatever laws, and just in case you're wondering, yes, there is a specific number. The trouble is that number is one thing for men and another for women, so I just say 630 whatever, and that sort of covers us all. Anyway, these 631 whatever laws, every single one of them stems from these 2. Love God with every part of you, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Jesus, in telling the rabbi and the others who objected to him healing that woman, that unnamed woman, on the Sabbath, when he told them they were all hypocrites, was reminding him that the basis for all the laws was a requirement to love God and the neighbor, and that surely this woman was more important and more neighbor than either ox or donkey. One cannot honor God, after all, if one is unloving toward the neighbor, when God's commandment is to love. Allowing someone to continue to be in pain when the means for healing is right there, how loving is that? What Jesus was telling the crowd is that where following a regulation conflicts with the greater law that requires us to love the neighbor, it is always necessary to obey the greater law, not the regulation. When he said, I have come to fulfill the law, he was saying that his mission is to remind the world of God's intent in providing the 10 Commandments to begin with, to give us a framework around which we could hang our understanding of those first 2 commandments. When he went off on the Pharisees and the other lawyer types about their rigid adherence to the regulations that were, quite frankly, sort of nitpicking, it wasn't because they were bad people or because there was anything wrong with the regulations. It wasn't even that there's something wrong with following them. However, they were letting individual trees get in the way of their seeing the beauty of the forest. They were so focused on the right way to do things and on perfect adherence to ever-changing rules and regulations that they forgot that the reasons for doing so were so the people of Israel could live together in harmony, knowing what was expected of them in every time and every circumstance. They forgot that the overarching concept that was the basis of all the laws and all the regulations is love. Love of God, love of all God's children. Not just the ones who obey the laws, all of them. All means all. You heard that somewhere. Back to the healing. That woman, that nameless woman, was freed from the bondage of pain and disability. Jesus' own words, freed from bondage. We know absolutely nothing about this woman except that she is bent over, crippled with pain. Maybe she has arthritis. Maybe it's something else. We really don't have any idea. Yet, strangely enough, the less we know about her, the more easily we can identify with her. because my back is causing me fits right now, as anyone who spends more than 30 seconds in my company is aware. I can relate. It is frustrating to be in pain every minute. It is exhausting. It is crazy-making to not be able to do the things I'm accustomed to doing, or to have to ask for help to do things I'm used to doing by myself. The cats are not real helpful. If somebody could just put their hand on me, like Jesus did on that woman, and make it all better, I would definitely feel freed from bondage. It would be great. I don't see it happening anytime soon, but it would be great. Now, Leah picked the image today because I really couldn't find the right thing. I can't always. And Leah picked that, and I looked at it, and I thought, oh, this is perfect. Because look, do these not look like paper chains? You know, the kind you make at Christmas for the tree, especially if you're teaching younger students, or can't afford the expensive kind. Because frankly, as much as I love the idea that my bondage to back pain could be broken as easily as I would break these paper chains, in reality, I know it's going to take time and exercise and continued treatments before I feel whole again. It's not going to just happen, and I'm going to have to work for it. Darn it. Jesus came to save the entire world. He came to heal the entire world. He came to teach us how to do that, how to go out and love the world into healing, into reconciliation with God. However, we can't love the world very well until we first love ourselves, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. Luckily, we don't have to be perfect before we can love each other. That's a really good thing, or nobody would get much love. But we do have to be embarked on a journey of healing. Unfortunately, it isn't just a matter of saying, heal me, Jesus, and then we're whole and well. That would be awesome too, but almost never happens. The world's bondage to sin is not as easy to break as the paper chains in this image. Even our own individual chains are hard to break. In some cases, our attachment to our own particular ills more resembles the chains holding a big ship's anchor than a paper chain. Let me give you some examples. As a survivor of domestic violence, I know that one of the most important tools for my healing is forgiveness. And that takes more than just saying, I forgive him. It takes more than saying, Jesus, please help me forgive him. It took time and praying about it and writing about it and talking about it and more praying about it. And finally, one day I was able to say his name without getting angry. And then I knew that healing had started and forgiveness had happened. I had been healed of that particular sin. I've been married more than once. And you know, forgiveness, working on it. Likewise, trying to forgive the church in which I was raised for the way I was raised, and then forgiving myself for the outright hatred I had for that church for many, many years, took a really long time. Healing came finally on Christmas Eve 2014, after decades of praying and writing and talking, when I walked up to the altar of a church, allowed the priest there to place his hand on my head and bless me. The feeling of freedom from bondage, from that sin, was overwhelming. I felt healing happen. All he did was touch me and say a word or two in Jesus' name, and the chains holding that sin into place just fell away, as if they had been made of paper. And those who hurt me, Jesus came to free us all, every single one of us, from the bondage of self and sin. He was sent by God to heal the world, to reconcile all the world with God, our Creator. to bring peace to all lands and all persons. He was sent to remind us of those two greatest commandments, the two that everybody has to follow. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Let us go out from this place today, seeking healing and wholeness for the world and for ourselves. Let us begin again a journey toward completeness and reconciliation with our God and our neighbors and ourselves.